Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the individuals participating in the show. All persons described or mentioned in the podcast should be considered innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. This podcast contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions along with adult language, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
In 1905, 2 men go into the Nahanni Valley in Canada. For a while, they are never seen again. But this isn't the only mystery that occurs in this valley. But there's one particular trait that people keep finding. And rather than called the Nahanni Valley, it's now known as the Valley of the Headless Men. Let's find out why. You're listening to the Mysterious Brews podcast, and tonight we bring you the case of the Valley of the Headless Men.
Welcome to a deep, dark, dank, moist basement somewhere in the bowels of Georgia. Well, we had a little thunder boomers last night, woke me up a little bit, and then I'm like some old woman. I couldn't go back to sleep.
Oh, you're like a little woman.
I'd like a little baby. I was like catnapping from 2:30 to 5:30 until the dog woke me up. And then he's a princess. He can't go outside and pee-pee if his feet get wet.
Oh, no.
So that son of a gun will hold it until the only way I can get him, if it rains all day long, the only way I can get him to go is threaten him with an inch of his life out the back door and refuse to let him in.
God forbid he gets him little feeders wet.
I know, dude. He acts like such a goober head.
Did he
He had no traumatic experiences with his feet.
No, I'm just saying, like, my dog was a street dog when we took him in, and he is definitely a princess.
Mine,
he has forgotten where he came from.
Well, that's what I was about to say.
So much.
Yeah.
It's like, you lived on the streets. You ate garbage. And he's like, tap water, sir?
Yeah.
You dare give me unfiltered?
Yeah, mine spent most of his adult life and puppy life in a huge pen or fenced-in backyard, I guess I should say. I mean, it was huge. With another dog, and he's part Weimaraner, so they're very social. And so when the other dog passed, we had to bring Princess inside, and he literally has forgotten everything about being an outside dog, except eating cat shit. If I could make $1 million, if I could get money for the amount of cat shit that he eats, we could do this full time.
Oh, he eats cat shit, you saying?
Yes, we have a couple of community neighborhood cats that I guess find our yard, their litter box, and he will bird dog the shit out of it.
Brother,
literally.
we call them kitty cookies around here. My dog loves him some kitty cookies.
Yeah, this motherfucker kills me. But anyway, enough of that. So we have some good reviews from our off-the-cuff hijacked episode that we did.
I didn't mean to hijack the episode. The episode we're doing tonight is what we should have been doing last week. But, man, I still need advice. I'm not saying I don't. We got a little bit back. But if you have some honest feedback about what to do about this lady, Since I threatened the cops, though, she hasn't come back. She hasn't done anything this week.
So we are recording on the day that episode dropped, and we already have 200 listens. So
that's pretty good.
Yeah, we're doing pretty good. Especially
on that. Especially for an off the cuff. I mean, we're not True Crime Garage. We're not going to get a couple million, but for an off the cuff episode, I mean, I'm pretty satisfied with it.
Yeah. I'm trying to get to the comments because you have to fucking Spotify.
You have to fuck Spotify to get the comments?
Yeah, around here you do.
I'm not going to do it. I would rather not know the comments. But hey, man, I'm not going to question your sexuality. You do whatever you got to do with Spotify.
Because every time I go to... I'm not even acknowledging it.
Bypass the... Okay, all right. You're just going to keep going. Keep going, man. Don't encourage me.
No, not a bit. Okay, so this is what I was trying to get to. So on our St. Patty's Day, St. Patty, he's related to St. Patty. St. Patty's Day special that we dropped. We had one A Cornett, and he is quite the poster, which I love his humor. He's twisted like us. He said Wild Bean isn't a cryptid. It's some old guy beat his old lady, and that's what he told the law. And then I got called out for switching between Australian and English accent. At no point was it Irish, but I love y'all doing an Irish lore episode. Thank you so much.
Okay, first of all, is there a difference?
An English and an Australian?
There's a difference between Irish and English, absolutely. But is there a difference between English and an Australian?
Yeah.
No, not much.
Not much. Well, it depends on what part of London you're from. Also, I did respond to that one, and I said, I do apologize, but I cannot stay in Irish character. My Australian's horrible. However, if you would like for me to do a whole episode like I'm a Southie from Boston, I can do that, but my wife may divorce me because I get stuck in that accent.
Dude, yeah, like I used to try to impersonate Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, terribly, but like you're right. The more you try to impersonate an accent, the harder it is to stop.
Well, because when I worked at Coke, we would try to make people ask us if we were from Massachusetts or Boston, because we would talk to each other in Walmart on the aisle, stocking the shelves in that, and I would get stuck, dude. It was awful. Like she threatened to beat the shit out of me one day. All right. So that I was able to get in there and get them going. Okay, so let me get out of that. Now we go back to, Coach did get some advice. One sound, one even better, one rooted in, I think, scientific approach, to be honest with you. We will keep, before we get to that, wanted to shout out a couple of new patrons. We got Jen and Barry, aka Ben and Jerry. We got JT Rex. Welcome to the shit show, boys and girls. And then the advice that he did get. Let's see if this messes up. Does it? Yes. I do not like this. Yes, I want to leave. Where's it at? There it is. No, it ain't. Nope. I just had it pulled up, and now the damn thing's disappeared. Sons of bitches.
It's like playing cards. It's like playing cards with my brother's kids or something. You nerve-wracking sons of bitches.
You go one more time. You touch that one more time. All right, so the OGs came out. And we're going to keep the OGs anonymous because they don't like to be called out by name.
But we appreciate the hell out of them.
Yes, we do.
That's why we keep them anonymous, because we respect them.
And if you want to stay anonymous, let us know. We will keep your identity.
It's so crazy that we have OGs, like people that really like found us pretty early on, and we're like, I like these dumb motherfuckers.
Yeah,
and I'm gonna keep listening,
and have stuck
we've been
with
doing
us.
This shit for almost 5 years, and they've stuck around. We haven't run them off yet.
Not yet.
They're like, hell, fucking yeah.
Those are my people. Anyway, all right. So the first one, sound advice. The next one, even better, probably legal advice, I would say. So the first one is OG1, was what we'll call her. The Georgia Department of Human Services has an adult protective service group. If you believe your neighbor is failing to care for herself, they may be able to help. I know she's being a pain in your ass, and that to a lot of people in the neighborhood, but if the neighbor is very thin, like maybe she's not eating, or if you suspect she is on or needs medication that she is not taking, they may be able to help her/you.
I definitely think she's on medication that she's not taking.
And then she goes on to say, also get some cameras, record any conversation you have with her. Remember, Georgia is a one-party state. The cameras and recorded conversations will be evidence collection, and good luck. And so we're like, oh, that's some good sound advice. And then OG2 comes in and said, my response to this is, if Coach decides to go through with this piece of advice, there will be a video blog. Because OG2 says, get a roll of duct tape, a can of cat food, and a barbecue fork. Keep these items by your door. When she steps outside, get naked. And she spelt naked correctly if you're from the South. Grab tools and go outside shouting, here, kitty, 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 kitty. After they release you from the psych hold, let us know how it went and if she ever bothers you anymore. I'm thinking that's some sound advice right there.
I agree.
I think it needs to go in a pamphlet. We should have, that's what we should do. We should have done a tongue-in-cheek soft music playing in the background. Do you have a crazy-ass neighbor? If so, try one of these.
You might be entitled to compensation.
Call us. Okay, so that's enough of the bills. I don't think... Did anybody say anything about this one? No. Let me close that and let's get after it, boys and girls. We are talking about the Valley of Headless Men. Now, for all our Canadian listeners, and if we have any indigenous Canadian listeners, I'm going to go ahead and apologize up front. I'm going to do the best I can do.
Oh, you'll do fine, man. You always do good. Yes. You've never mispronounced anything in your life.
Especially the Mexican Giants case.
No, never.
Absolutely just shot Swiss cheese all over that. Okay, so the Valley of Headless Men, better known as the Nahanni National Park, is an 11,600 square mile wilderness preserve located along the South Nahanni River. The Nahanni River Valley is named after an ancient tribe that lived in the region, known to their neighbor as the Naha. These neighbors were the Dene people, known as the Slave or Slavey. And they were of European contacts-ish, so there was some intermingling in the Dene people, but the Naha were strictly indigenous. The Dene lived along the Mackenzie and South Nahanni rivers, and they were also known as the Athabascan or the Athapascan. And they are also one of the core ethno-linguistic groups of North America. And if you don't know what that is, that means that a lot of the language that we have in North America comes from those tribes. The territory stretched from western Alaska over the Hudson Bay, and the Dene languages and the people that are associated with them are not limited to the far northern reaches, and the people that are not shit. I just tried to re-say everything I just said. Let's try that again. So they're not limited to the northern reaches of the continent. Smaller tribes are known to exist in both the Pacific Northwest and the American Southwest. Now, the Dene of the Nahanni region refer to themselves as the Decho. And that's where I'm going to go ahead and apologize. If that's not right, if it's Deco, please, I'm sticking with Decho. They were introduced to Europeans by the name of the Akawakanak.
The what? What?
A Wakanak.
Yeah, that's definitely right.
No, that is right, because I heard somebody say it, and then I phonetically spelt it, so kiss it.
I was on your side.
Yeah.
I was saying it was right.
You're making fun of me.
I was not. I was. I was saying you were right, man. I was being on your side. I was trying to be a good partner.
All right, so they were given this name by the Cree, who were their enemies. And the Cree were known to raid the Decho territory to take slaves, and a Wakanak in the northwestern Cree dialects means slave. So the early Canadians / Europeans who formed the Hudson's Bay Company referred to them as the slave Indians. Within the quote-unquote slave Indians, the early Canadians separated them into two different groups, the North and the South. The South slavery, or slavey people, were the term Decho, while the North slavey preferred the term Satu. Now, both populations descend from people who came over to this region a very long time ago. And by very long time ago, I mean the dawn of humanity long time ago. Now, one of the folk tales of the Decho tribe is known as the Long Winter. So bear with me, because it has a bearing on how we proceed. So in this oral history, it is said that it was always winter with everlasting overcast skies and endless snow. Some versions state that the ashes fell as the world burned. Now, this could be in reference to the Younger Dryas period. And the legend goes on to say that a number of animals or clans traveled looking for a warm place in this ice and snow world. Eventually, they come to a hole in the rock face, and when they pass through said hole, they come to a land of, quote, perpetual summer, end quote. In this realm, they locate a tent where there is a character, sometimes referred to as a human and other times referred to as a bear. Now, this entity guards several bags, and one of the bags is a bag of warm air. This is the bag of heat that keeps this whole region warm. Now, what happens next varies with the tellings, but basically these quote-unquote travelers distract the guardian and steal the bag. They hastily take this warm bag back through the hole that they came in from, and once they exit the hole, they open up said bag, and the entire earth becomes warm again. However, this rapid warming causes a tremendous flood because all the ice and glaciers melted at once. Now, there is a section of this story where everyone has to climb onto a tree, so you may hear that version as well. So if we try and place this long winter story into the geological record of the Younger Dryas, then the flood event matches pretty well, and the meltwater pulse all right, so they're calling this meltwater pulse 1B, and that occurred 11,600 years ago. Now, if you don't know what meltwater pulse 1B is, then do you even history, bro? I mean, do you?
I mean, that's common knowledge, right?
Yeah, meltwater 1B. God, it's like you're stuck on meltwater 1A.
They teach that in like first grade around here.
Yeah, I mean, you got to check yourself. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, so if we come clean, I have no idea what the hell they're talking about anyway. But what it sounds like is there was a couple of major meltings that took place, and this is B part of the first one. This is where the global sea levels rose about 82 feet in just about 100 years, and then sea levels then proceeded to rise another 98 feet over the course of the next 1,000 years. So if both of these events, the snow and ice world as well as the meltwater pulse 1B incident, are explained in this long winter story, that means that the Decho people have been in North America for approximately 12,800 years, and more likely a little bit longer than that. So when we say indigenous, we mean indigenous. Due to these oral tradition stories, the people of the Nahanni region have a healthy respect/fear of the Nahanni River Valley. The fear is associated with the word Naha. Now, if you research the Naha tribe, you find an extinct tribe in the region. They are described as violent barbarians. You will also find that one inexplicable afternoon, they just vanished off the face of the earth. So in 2002, the Decho Grand Chief Herb Norwegian told Parks Canada that the Naha were one of the Decho tribes that lived up in the mountains, and they lived there for hundreds of years, ultimately becoming a great nation. They were nomads who dwelled in the mountainous regions of the Nahanni or the Nani River, and would come down into the lowlands every summer to raid the people living there. Eventually, the lowland Decho people became fed up with the raids, and the chiefs organized a war party to go up into the mountains to put an end to the Naha raids by burning their villages to the ground, scatter their people to the four winds. No more raiding was going to be the message. Once the war party arrived in the mountains, they had found the location of the Naha village. They looked down from their high point and saw that there was nobody there, and everyone in the Naha village was gone. It is not clear as to when this discovery was made, but the stories and legends state that the Naha completely disappeared. And if we believe these stories, then the Naha vanished without a trace overnight approximately 600 years ago. Now, there is not a lot of credible history on the Naha, but what you find is the history of the Nani. You also find the word Naka, which means the root. So the documentation for the Nani goes back over hundreds of years, and the Decho spoke of beings sometimes as humans and sometimes as monsters. Now, there are missionaries from the time that state that the Naka or the Nani are wild men who live amongst the crags and canyons of the Nahanni River Valley. June Helm McInish wrote an article in 1954 for the Journal of American Folklore, second quarterly edition, titled Contemporary Folk Beliefs of a Slave Indian Band. Now, according to McNish, the Naka would emerge during the summers as the foliage gave them cover. In the winter, they would retreat to underground shelters. There, they would live off of stored food and basically hibernate.
That sounds like the Giants, man.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I mean, really, were they rumored to be giants? They were rumored to be vicious and very much inhospitable.
Yeah, the more...
But were they rumored to be giants?
Well, I'm trying to do like the Reader's Digest version. I'm pretty sure if you dive into it, I would say 90% that there were some very large, tall individuals in these tribes.
I would guess so.
Now, missionary Emil Petito in 1876 wrote, quote, "Each year during the summer, a fear spreads among them in an epidemic and irrational fashion. They live at that time in continual terror in fear of an imaginary enemy who pursues them without rest and who they believe see everywhere, even though he does not exist at all. To the missionaries moving through the area, this was odd. It was like they were afraid of demons." End quote. So they were afraid of things that were just not there. And the missionaries saw these stories as ghost stories. So to the Decho, these Naka or Nani were very real. And the Decho had specific things that they knew about these Naka. One example was they were all male. They knew this because they never saw a Naka woman. And the Naka raiders would come down and they would take the Decho women and children back to the Naka homeland. The Decho presumed that because there were no Naka women, the males would come down to take Decho women as wives. It was also said that when the Decho men would follow the Naka back to rescue their women and children, they would come to the camp and it would appear as if the Naka had just left. Fires would still be burning. There would still be food and things sitting out. It appeared as if they had just escaped right before the Decho raid parties or war parties had arrived. On the rare occasion that the Naka were seen, they were described mostly as human. One description was as a Cree half-breed or a muti with a beard. The person was described as looking ragged, basically somebody who looked like they had been weathered by their environment. Even into the 20th century, fear of the Naka persisted. This fear still gripped Decho communities, even though almost no one had ever encountered a Naka. Most white writers of the 19th and 20th centuries found this fear of what was referred to as, quote, strange Indians, Bushmen, end quote, or, quote unquote, painted men. Bizarre because, once again, as far as these white writers were concerned, these people did not exist. So in 1909, a plethora of odd discoveries led people to question if all of this was just a superstition that had carried over from when the Naha were a serious and real threat. So in February of 1909, a man by the name of Charlie McLeod reported the suspicious deaths of his brothers Frank and Willie to the Royal Northwestern Mounted Police. This is the precursor to the RCMP. And it all began with a tip given by the father of the McLeod boys. In Raymond Patterson's book, The Dangerous River, which was published in 1950s, Raymond speaks to Charlie McLeod. And Charlie is the other brother of Willie and Frank. But he says that Willie and Frank were actually mutis. And their mother was either a Decho or a muti woman. And their father, Murdoch, was from the Hebrides in Scotland. Now, Murdoch McLeod was the trade post manager at Hudson Bay Company. And that was located at Fort Leard. Mutis are one of the three classes of indigenous people in Canada, with the other two being the Inuit and First Nations. Mutis are people who are both First Nations and white. So according to Raymond Patterson, and I'm going to quote Raymond Patterson in his little book a lot, The Dangerous River. So when you hear me say Mr. Patterson, that's what that's what I'm referring to. So according to Raymond, Willie and Frank were raised as Indians. They were very familiar with the Decho culture, the territory, the way of life, and they were accustomed to the way things were done at the Hudson Bay Company. Upon reaching adulthood, they followed in their father's footsteps and started to work for the company as well. While their father Murdoch was in charge of Fort Leard, he received a tip from a friend of his. This friend tells Murdoch that somewhere up the Flat River to the west, near the Yukon border, there was a very good gold prospect that he should consider taking a look at. Willie and Frank were immediately intrigued by this prospect, but at the time, traveling up the South Nani River was extremely dangerous. So in 1899, Murdoch, whose eyesight was starting to fail him, moved his family to Edmonton, and his sons, Willie, Charlie, Frank, and Fred, continued to work for the Hudson's Bay Company up north. For some unknown reason, Willie, Frank, and Charlie decided they would leave from Edmonton to go see if they could find that Flat River gold. Now, no one knows why they decided to leave from Edmonton. It could have been that they wanted to visit their family before heading off into the wilderness, just in case things went sour. So the trio of McLeod brothers takes a train to Vancouver, and from there they board a boat to Wrangell, Alaska, where they buy sled dogs and supplies before heading up the Stecking River in January of 1904. From there, they followed the river to the outpost on Telegraph Creek, which was roughly 150 miles away. No, I'm sorry. From the Stecking River to the outpost was 150 miles. So then they traveled northeast to Dease Lake. Oh, it takes all I have not to say anything about that. Where they then traveled across the lake, reaching the north end of Dease River. I can't. God almighty. I'm like a 7-year-old in kindergarten.
Say it, man. Come on, man. Say it. Dease River.
Dease Lake. Oh my God! From there they followed.
Do it.
From there they followed the river until it met its confluence with the Liard River. Oh, Dease River done flowed into the Liard River. So after that, their exact route is anyone's guess. All anybody knows for sure is that they traveled north until they met the Flat River. While traveling down the Flat River, they meet a group of Casca Native Americans. The Casa were a different Decho-speaking tribe that were located west of the main Decho tribe. Now, the McLeods are extremely interested in the Casca because when they first made contact, a lot of these Casca were just carrying gold nuggets around like rocks. Now, the McLeods estimated that these nuggets were worth $2 or $3 in 1905. Now, keep in mind, that's 1905 prices. I did not look up the price of gold now, but a $2 to $3 nugget back then, I would dare say you could add at least 2 zeros to the end of that, if not more. Now, the McLeod boys try in vain to get the Casca to tell them where they had found these nuggets, but they would not give them any detail. And this is probably because the native tribes did not place a lot of value on gold like the white man did. So undeterred, the McLeod boys figured that since they met them at the location on the Flat River, that they had to be in the general vicinity of where the Casca had picked up these nuggets. So they prospected and looked around for a while, eventually coming across some sluice boxes that the Casca had made. Now, Patterson states that according to Charlie McLeod, this was about 20 miles up the river from Cascade of 13 Steps. Now, the Cascade of 13 Steps is a series of rapids and drops that pass through a canyon along the Flat River. The boys were not able to collect a lot of gold, but did manage enough to fill a small glass tincture bottle. They figured that this amount of gold should be enough to find people to fund an expedition. Since this
what bottle?
Glass tincture. Think about a glass, an old glass.
A tincture bottle.
One of them old glass eyedropper bottles.
Okay. Yeah, that's plenty.
Yeah, that would be plenty of be like, look, man, this everywhere, but we just were able to bring this little bit back. We need you to give us some money so we can go get 10 times this. Mm-hmm. So since they were on a prospecting trip and not a mining trip, they, like I said, figured they had enough to get some money to set up a source mining operation. So the McLeod brothers start to travel down the Flat River, and once they are on the Flat and made it to the Nani, it was just going to be a short trip to Fort Liard. Sounds easy peasy, lemon squeezy, but they were upriver of the Cascade of 13 Steps, which meant they had to navigate down said Cascade of 13 Steps. And this is one of the, I think it's top 10 whitewater rapids in the world. So their little rafts or canoes or whatever you want to call them that they had made out of what they found around, they were no match for them there rapids. And after traversing the first step of the 13, all of their shit goes sideways and they capsize. And when I say everything goes to shit in a handbasket, I mean they lost everything except for a rifle, a handful of bullets, and that was about it. So, realizing that they could not show up to Fort Liard empty-handed, they turn around, head back up river, but during this whole capsizing of their rafts and canoes, they lose their food cache and start having to live off the land. And they make it back to the river, did find some more gold, but not as much as they had originally found. So they fashion all their little canoes and rafts back together into a bigger one this time and make their way back down the Cascade of 13 Steps. So after surviving all of this and getting back to Fort Lear, Charlie's like, nope, I ain't going back. Y'all can have it. Willie and Frank, however, decide that they were definitely going back, 'cause there's gold in them there hills. Now, using the last bit of gold they had, they persuaded a young Scotsman by the name of Robert Weir to take Charlie's spot. So this new trio headed back out in 1905 in hopes of setting up a legit mining operation. The plan was to stay for a while, but just how long is anyone's guess. Weir and the McLeod brothers didn't tell anyone how long they planned on staying. And after several weeks and pushing 2 months, no one had heard from the trio. Charlie is not overly concerned because they had enough supplies and were excellent hunters, so they could live off the land if they were in the gold. Months turn to fall, which eventually turns to winter. And Charlie, again, is not overly concerned and thought that the trio had decided just to winter on the river and make their way home in the spring. 1906 comes and goes, and no sign from Charlie's brothers or Mr. Weir. And then 1907 comes and goes, and still no word. So in 1908, Charlie decided that there might be something wrong, and he needed to go find his brothers and Mr. Weir. So he assembles a group of 7 friends, and they decide that he would basically retrace the steps that he and Frank and Willie took the first time in 1905. So in 1908, as the group of men were approaching one end of the second canyon, which is flanked by massive 1,000-foot-tall cliffs on both sides of the river, they see an encampment. Now, this encampment was just outside of the second canyon of the northern banks of the river. And according to Charlie's son, who gave an account to the newspaper in 1947, they find 2 skeletons. One was lying face up, apparently still in bed, and the other one was lying face down, arm outstretched towards a tree where a rifle was found. Now, when I say they were found face up and face down, it's more like they were found belly up and belly down, because the 2 skeletons were missing their skulls. And according to initial reports given to the newspapers by Charlie McLeod himself in 1909, the skeleton who had been in the bed in the tent had been shot in the chest, and that's how they assumed he died. The other skeleton seemed to have been killed while attempting to dive from the tent to grab the rifle. The 2 skeletons were ultimately identified as Frank and Willie by the belongings found in and near the tent. The problem is there were only 2 skeletons. What happened to the Scotsman, Robert Weir? Immediately, everyone starts to suspect old Weir had killed the 2 McLeod men and run off with the gold. They suspect this because when they look through the camp, they can't find any gold. And another reason everybody was thinking there should have been gold is that nearby, scrawled onto some wood, Charlie finds a message, and it says, quote, "We have found a very fine prospect," end quote. Now, according to Charlie, the McLeod brothers had a habit of carving things into wood as they made their way down trails in case anyone needed to locate them, or if they needed to locate somewhere they had previously been. So a February 12th, 1909 article in the Edmonton Journal records that there had also been a second message carved into yet another piece of wood. However, that piece of wood had been hacked on purpose so that you could not read what was scratched into it. A notebook that Frank McLeod was known to always carry and to always record his experiences was found. Now, this journal or diary or whatever you want to call it had also been ruined. It appeared that someone had deliberately tried to hide where the mine was. The only other legible message they could find anywhere along the route that the men had taken was one that had a date on it, and that date was May 1905. And we're talking about 1908 when they find them. So the theory at the time was the men had made it to this date marking, which was near Fort Leard, and passed all the dangers of the valley. It was at this spot, after scribbling the date, that Robert Weir had killed the McLeod brothers so he could take everything for himself. The Royal Northwestern Mounted Police sent out a Corporal Malore along with his detachment to see if they could find anything new or if they could find if Weir had been in the area. Now, according to news accounts and family stories, Charlie McLeod accompanied the corporal to guide him to where the encampment had been. As they were making their way back to Second Canyon and the site of the bodies, they interviewed the indigenous tribes in the area and asked if they had seen 3 white prospectors. They were able to find some natives that told them that they had found some of what turned out to be Weir's belongings along the Dead Man's Valley region. This is how Charlie referred to the region after he named it Dead Man's Valley after he found the skeletons of his brothers. Now, once the Mounties had finished checking all the evidence, they determined that the men had sold off some of their supplies. This had left them with 50 pounds of flour and 5 pounds of tea. The Mounties' conclusion was that the men must have just starved to death and died of exposure. You know, because dying of exposure, you lose your fucking head and it can never be found again. And you also get a bullet hole in your chest.
Yeah, every person I've seen that has died of exposure has definitely lost their head.
Yeah. And it's about a 50-50 shot whether you have a gunshot wound.
That's one of the main causes of exposure is your head falls off and disappears and is never found again. And
if you die of exposure,
look at the evidence. Look at the history of exposure deaths.
If you die of exposure in Arkansas, your dog may eat your head off.
Christopher McCandless went to Alaska and he stayed in that bus for 100 and something days. And when they found him without his head, right?
Right. He died of exposure.
Am I mistaken?
No.
Everyone loses their head when they died of exposure.
It's like a
thing that happens.
Yeah, it's like a steam kettle. It just pops right off. Now, doubling down on natural causes, the Mounties stated it was probably just the wolves and the bears of the regions that scavenged their bodies. Because, up there in that area, the wolves and the bears, they only eat the heads. Now, this would not be the last mysterious death in the Nahanni River Valley, because if it was, we wouldn't be covering it. We now move to the story of Martin Jorgensen. And his story is a head scratcher, if you know what I'm talking about. Jorgensen's story comes from 2 accounts, one by a man named Poole Field, and the other from a man named Osias Mayor. Now, in a 1971 news article and another article written in 1984 where the same Robert Patterson was interviewed, and Raymond Patterson. Raymond did not cite the Mayor story in his 1984 article. Now, that account was written in by the author of the article. The story goes like this. Mayor and Jorgensen were partners. The 2 men had set up a camp and a cache at a small gold mine in 1910-1911. Jorgensen had decided to winter at the mine, while Mayor had decided that he was going to go back to Fort Simpson. Mayor never heard from Jorgensen again, and Jorgensen never came out of the valley. So in 1914, what is it with these fuckers that they wait 3 years to go look for somebody?
Well, it was a long time ago. You don't get a lot of news at the time.
Yeah, but if I ain't heard from you in a year, I'm going to come looking. I'm not going to give you 3.
Yeah, but you got to prepare. You got to do all these other things. You're thinking in today's world. You got to think about 1900 whatever.
Don't you dare use logic on me, boy.
I will. I'll do it. Don't you tempt me. Don't you be putting
that logic on me.
Don't you do that, Ricky Bobby. Don't you put that evil on me. I'm just saying you got to prepare, man. It's like you're going to go into the Canadian wilderness for however long. It takes some preparation, brother.
You're right. You may be right, Hale.
I am right. I know I am.
So 1914, Mayor decides to go looking for Jorgensen. And about a mile up from where the Flat River meets the South Nahanni River, Mayor found a cabin that was very close to a site where he and Jorgensen had set up a cache a few years earlier. Now, upon arriving at the cabin, Mayor notices that it is not in the shape that he remembered it being when he last left there. The cabin had been burned out, and right in front of him, he found a 30-55 rifle that was rusted, and that's a model rifle. I have no idea what the hell it is. He also finds a loaded .22 caliber revolver and some clothes that seem to match those Jorgensen had on. Now, when Mayor got back to Fort Simpson, he reported all this to the Royal Northwestern Mounted Police. Remember this, they are the precursor of the RCMP. They sent out a detachment under Corporal Churchill, and in old Raymond Patterson's book, The Dangerous River, he details Poole's account and not Mayor's. Now, this is probably due to the fact that Raymond knew Poole Field, and they had become pretty good friends in the 1920s. So Poole would also write several letters to a friend whose name is Jack Moran. In this account, it is claimed that in 1915, Poole Field received a letter from Martin Jorgensen telling him that there was a prospect he should come check out. Poole Field's letters to Jack Moran suggested that in 1912, he had told Jorgensen that he had heard about a gold prospect on the Flat River and that Jorgensen should go check it out. A note is sent from Jorgensen to Poole about this prospect. So it's a whole convoluted snafu of letters. So basically, somebody, and I'm thinking Jorgensen, finds this gold vein or mine, and he tells his buddy, and his buddy tells Poole, and they all start messaging each other via the Postal Service or the Pony Express, whatever you want to call it. Some notes were exchanged, I guess, is the best way to look at it. So a note is sent from Jorgensen to Poole about this prospect. It was delivered to Poole by a Native American messenger. The note simply stated, quote, "I found gold. It's in the area. Come and meet me. I will leave you a sign below the first of the canyons along the river," end quote. So this location is about 80 miles up from the mouth of the Flat River. Poole would state that when he and his native colleague, a man by the name of Oscar, arrived at the canyon, they found a quote unquote blazed trail leading downriver and then to a small lake. So it took me a little bit, but a blazed trail is a well-worn path. So that's just how they referred to a well-worn path or trail back then. Blazed path. Blazed trail. So this blazed trail leading down from the river to the small lake, that's where they find, or Poole finds, this empty cabin that was burnt out. And they do find a pole with a map attached to it. And that map included the Nahanni, the Flat, and two big creeks which empty into the South Nahanni, between the confluence of the Flat and the Nahanni and the Virginia Falls. The creeks were on the north side of the Nahanni, and according to Poole, they were markers for where cabins had been placed. It was stated that Martin Jorgensen would be at one of the cabins, and based on the maps today, these were likely Wrigley and Clearwater creeks. Now, the exact quote is, "On the right, going upstream, on one of the creeks at the second fork on the left, going upstream, was a square marked cabin, and above the mouth of the Flat on the opposite side of the river, and about a mile above, another square and marked cabin," end quote. Now, that's what was scrawled on the note with the map, and this would be where Poole locates Jorgensen's body in the burned out cabin. Now, internet personalities have theorized that they started up at Rabbit Kettle Hot Springs, made their way down overland to the flat. Then they found the map, traveled down the Flat River to Caribou River, take a detour down the Caribou to see if there was any gold there before they actually head back up the flat and down the mouth of the Nahanni. I hope you're following me. Now, this is where Martin's note comes back into play because he had written something under the map. He had stated that if he wasn't at his cabin that was at the mouth of the flat, then he'd be at his cabin further up the creeks. They did not have to wonder for very long which cabin he was at because upon reaching the mouth of the Flat River and traveling for about a mile, remember, they reached this quote-unquote Blaze Trail. And it is similar to the other Blaze Trail they had seen. Now, this Blaze Trail led to the cabin, the burned out one. Investigating the burned out cabin, Poole finds that a path had been cut through some of the brush. He followed said path down and he finds an axe that was laying right in the middle of the trail. He searches around where the axe is at, walked around the tree, and behind the tree, he finds Martin Jorgensen's bones with one exception. You guessed it. He ain't got no head on him. Now, his pistol was found nearby, cocked and loaded, and his rifle was completely missing. Poole buried Martin's remain and then searched the scene again, looking for any indication to what happened to Jorgensen. The theory at the time was that Jorgensen had more than likely been shot/ambushed from his own cabin as he returned. Someone had possibly found out about Jorgensen's prospect and knew he had gold. The killer waited by his cabin, and then as Jorgensen is coming up the trail to the cabin, they shoot him, rob him, take his body, hide it behind a tree. They then proceed to burn the cabin in hopes of hiding the evidence. Now, Poole would estimate that the murder had occurred the winter prior to him arriving at the camp. Poole's letter also implies that the Mounties eventually did determine who had killed Martin Jorgensen, but that man they thought was a suspect died in California before he could be arrested. However, the RCMP told Raymond Patterson when he asked about it that they had never investigated the death of a man named Martin Jorgensen, and they had no clue what the hell he was talking about. So again, another mysterious death, and the corpse is found, or the skeleton is found, without a head. So over the course of the next 2 decades, death comes to the valley is an understatement. So in 1922, a man named John O'Brien disappeared. John was a trapper and a veteran of World War I, and in 1921, he decided that he was going to venture into the Nahanni Valley with another man to see if they could make some money in the fur trading business. According to John's partner, who is not named John, let me try that again. According to John's partner, who they do not name, John tells said partner that he was going to go check some traps on January 27th, 1922, and he would be back in 8 to 10 days. John didn't come back in that time. After the 10 days, however, this unnamed partner rounded up some help and went looking for John. 3 weeks would go by until, in fact, they did find John along the trap line. He was frozen solid. The RCMP investigated, but since they found the man frozen in winter along his trap line, they figured he had succumbed to the elements. Now, several versions of John O'Brien's story say that he was found holding a matchbook over a pile of kindling. Now, this comes from an interview with a frontiersman named Billy Clark. Problem is, Billy wasn't even in the area in 1922. So in the summer of 1921, there was another mysterious disappearance. And this was Poole Field. Yep, same one. It was his cousin-in-law, a woman by the name of May Lafferty. Now, this one's odd as shit. Now, May disappeared while her family was camping in the Krause Hot Springs area. According to a 1929 article in the Edmonton Journal, she was spotted running off into the bush. Now, Poole knew a lot of people in the area, both native and white, and he was able to get a group of friendly natives to help him track down May. They followed her trail into the woods where they find her clothes. The problem is, they are not in just one area. It is as if she was undressing as she ran. Now, this search group or search party was able to get on May's trail fairly quickly. However, they could never catch up to her. May was not a woman who was familiar with the area. She was not from the Nahanni Valley. She was from Fort Providence, which is 200 miles to the east. So somehow, a girl who was completely unfamiliar with the area was able to evade capture by Native American trackers who had grown up in the valley. So for 9 whole days, Poole and his native trackers search. And after that 9th day, they lose all signs of May and have to give up the search. There was nothing to go on. They followed her tracks until they simply disappeared. The only explanation for why she had run off to begin with was that maybe the mosquitoes drove her crazy. Mosquitoes will drive you crazy, but I don't think you're going to strip naked and run through the woods at such a fast pace that you outrun Native American trackers.
I don't know. I mean, our mosquitoes are pretty bad.
And supposedly the Canadian ones are even worse.
Southeastern mosquitoes are pretty bad.
They are, but Canadian ones are like pterodactyls, I heard.
I mean, we can't discredit that.
That is true. That is true. Now, one story I heard about May Lafferty was that someone near the lake that she was at, or the springs that she was at, saw a naked woman in the moonlight babbling to herself, and then she shot off. So,
really?
Yeah, so there's some weirdness going on with that one.
That's very weird.
So the next strange disappearance in the valley occurred roughly 11 years later in 1931 when a man named Phil Powers went into the valley to do some trapping. When he didn't return as expected in the spring of 1932, the RCMP sent out a detachment led by Constables Martin and Edwards with none other than Poole Field and Albert Fale as civilian guides. Albert Fale was a friend and traveling companion of one Raymond Patterson, the one that wrote the book. Now remember, he is basically the sole source for most of these stories. So said detachment, along with Poole and Albert, find Powers' cabin in the fall of 1932 in the Flat River area. This cabin was approximately 30 miles from the McLeod encampment, which is pretty damn close. Now, this cabin, just like Jorgensen's burned out cabin, was also burned out. All that remained of Phil Powers was a charred skeleton. According to Patterson, the detachment discovered that this fire had likely occurred in 1931, and they were there in 1932. Strange thing is, they found a document in the cabin that had, quote, Phil Powers is finished, -1932, end quote on it. And another oddity was that Mr. Powers was discovered in the rubble, and the RCMP believed that he had been lying in bed when the cabin collapsed on top of him. According to a 1971 article which cites a Royal Canadian Mounted Police report, Mr. Powers' rifle was found nearby, rigged with a tripwire inside the cabin. Other reports cited suggest that the RCMP determined that this was suicide. All right, let me explain something to you before we go any further. I don't believe that for a damn minute. There ain't no way you're going to set your cabin on fire, lie in the bed, let the flames engulf you, and that's how you're going to go out when you got a trusty, dusty rifle sitting right there that'll do the job quick and easy. So in 1936, William Epler and Joseph Malond disappeared. And Raymond Patterson knew both men personally and actually stayed at their cabin in 1926. Now, again, we have a cabin that is burned down and two men who seemingly vanished without a trace. So we're on our third burned out cabin. Some have theorized that the cabin burned down as a result of an accident and the two men became lost trying to find shelter and succumbed to the elements. Their bodies were never located. In 1946, Frank Henderson returned from a prospecting trip without his partner, a man named Jack Patterson. Now, Jack is no relation to Raymond Patterson, the author. But Frank Henderson and Jack had set off for the valley in March of 1946, trying to enter the valley from two different directions, one from the top, one from the bottom. So Frank had been exploring the valley for about 10 years at this point. The men had decided that Jack would enter the valley from the Yukon side, while Frank would enter the valley from the Northwest Territory side. The pair agreed that they would meet at Virginia Falls. Now, the plan was for Patterson's team to come down the South Nahanni River, and Henderson's team would work their way up the South Nahanni River. Did I just say that backwards? No, I said it right. So whoever reached Virginia Falls first was supposed to leave a message saying where they were heading next and not wait on the other party. Both men were familiar with the area. So Henderson arrived first, and he left a message saying that he would be heading down into the valley. Yes, the same valley where the McLeod brothers had been found in 1908. Henderson expected that Patterson's group would rendezvous with him and his party fairly quickly because the valley was the ultimate destination. Now, after several weeks of prospecting, Patterson had not shown up. Henderson is worried at this point. He thinks to himself that there is a possibility that Patterson had gotten to the rendezvous point at Virginia Falls and had just not seen his message and gone, or had gotten to the rendezvous point earlier from a different direction. So Henderson gathered his crew, comprised completely by Native Americans, and he takes them back to Virginia Falls. They camp there for a few days, hoping that Patterson will show up, but there's no sign of Patterson or his crew, and there's no note on the tree, no sign that he or his men had camped there. After a few days of camping, the native Decho people with Henderson start getting nervous. And they start telling Henderson that they were seeing strange figures moving around in the valley. Henderson writes this off as tricks of light, but the natives were insistent that they did not want to stay in that area anymore. Clearly, this was not just tricks of light, and they were genuinely scared. Henderson scoffs at the legend of the Nani, but his crew is like, peace, A-Town out. And they leave a white man by himself. So Kemosabe's by himself, and eventually Henderson makes his way out. Upon arriving back in civilization, he makes it abundantly clear that he does not believe that any sort of Native Americans or their ghosts were responsible for Patterson's party's disappearance. The natives wholeheartedly disagree with the white boy. I'm siding with the natives. If you're keeping score, I'm siding with them there, natives. I think they know.
Absolutely, I am too.
I don't think they are. I don't think they're going to lie to us.
Why would they? They have no reason to. So I'm going with them.
So the Canadian government declared Nahanni Valley to be a national park in 1971. After prospecting died out in the 50s and 60s, that'd be the 1950s and 60s, archaeological expeditions unveiled that there was some pretty important stuff to be researched in the valley with no strange stories coming from said region. That is, until 2005. So it was in 2005 that the region would once again claim the lives of two men, Fred Hardesty and David Horsey, both very experienced outdoorsmen from the Northwest Territories. The two middle-aged Fort Simpson men intended on staying several days at a cabin owned by their friend Rod Gunderson. And they were going to stay there because Rod needed some repairs on said cabin. Fred and Dave were last seen alive on June 12th, 2005 by Rod himself when he left them at the cabin, which is located 77 miles up the North Nahanni River. This is west of Fort Simpson and not that far into the mountains, so it's not very deep in the valley. Now, one YouTuber stated that the distance was short enough that if you became lost, you could find the Nahanni River and walk back to Fort Simpson. 4 days later, on June 16th, Rod returned to the cabin to check on his friends. It was at this point he realized that they weren't there, but their supplies, their weapons, their tools, everything was still at the cabin. There was no sign of a break-in. The cabin had not been ransacked. Nothing was stolen. No sign of a struggle. The men just were nowhere to be found. The RCMP does get involved 2 days later, dispatching Constable Brad Parker to the cabin. Now, Parker spoke to the men's friends, spoke to Rod Gunderson, the owner of the cabin, and determined that as far as he could ascertain, there was no reason that the pair should have been or should have had to leave the cabin. There was no sign of a gas leak. There was no sign of a fire. The men appeared to have just walked out one night and never returned. So RCMP would launch a search, but they could not find anything. After 5 days of searching and with no leads turning up, the Mounties called the search off, and they leave the area on June 23rd, 2005. So this leaves the two men's friends and their families to pick up the search. And they get some more friends, some more family members, and the Lidley First Nation community to continue searching for Fred and David. Fred was either a Decho or a Métis native. And the Lidley and Decho bands joined forces to continue searching for Fred and David. So on June 27th, as a result of these continued search efforts, they were able to locate the body of David Horsey. He was located in the brush approximately 2.5 miles in an area that had been previously searched by the RCMP. RCMP Corporal Al Shepard said that this spot had been searched multiple times, but the reason they never found David was because of how dense the brush was, which I think is a little crazy, but I'm not going to say anything at this moment. What is interesting about David Horsey is that a searcher by the name of Jason Antoine said it seemed that his arms had been burned. Now keep in mind, this is June. Now, more specifically, it was his forearms and his hands. Now, frostbite can appear as burns, but it couldn't have been frostbite because it's June. And it was the end of June. And it was way too warm. And the coldest it got in June that year was 40 degrees, which is about the average temperature or average low for that area. Now, despite the presence of burns on David's body, the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, determined his death had no possibility of being foul play. It was definitely just an accident, and he just wandered out of the cabin for no reason, and he got his arms burned and his hands burned, and he died.
I mean, definitely no reason.
No.
It just happened.
You know, you just wander out, burn the shit out of yourself.
These things happen.
I know.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
just some strange shit goes on up there in the Canadian North.
Why worry about it? Yeah. I mean, it happens.
Yeah. So the discovery of David's body did light a fire under the RCMP's proverbial ass, because they began searching again on July the 5th, and they even bring in a dog team this time from Alberta. And on July the 7th, their searchers locate the body of Fred Hardesty. And he is located in the North Nahanni River, about 12.5 miles from the cabin. And yes, he was located in the river. Now, this location had also been previously searched multiple times. Sounds like from the reports that I read, the body was actually found submerged. So he could have entered the river anywhere upstream and got washed down to where they found him. Autopsies were conducted on the two men, and when the results came in, there was even more confusion. While Fred Hardesty's cause of death was drowning, which was what one would think with his body being found in the river, David Horsey's cause of death, the man with the burned arms and hands, was listed as hypothermia. Did I mention earlier that they went missing in the end of June? So how in the hell does a man die from hypothermia when the lowest the air temperature it got those 3 days, according to the weather record, was 43 degrees?
Hypothermia?
That's what they determined, dude.
Oof, that's...
Now, you may be thinking that it could have gotten a little bit colder than 43 if it rained. Well, you'd be right, because that does occur, but guess what? There was no rain in that area for like 10 days. So once again, that's RCMP taking a page out of Fahmy's book, ruled out foul play. I am thinking they took one look at this bizarre burns, and when the coroner said, hey man, he died of hypothermia, they were like, nope, not investigating this shit. Tie a bow on it, boys. We're solving this one. So the First Nations community, the families of Fred and David, their friends, and the entire Fort Simpson community has been pressuring the RCMP to reopen this case as a murder investigation. Now, as of our recording, I could not find any more recent odd deaths in the Nahanni National Park Preserve area, or whether the pressure had made the RCMP reopen Fred and David's case. Oddly enough, the area has become quite popular with whitewater rafting enthusiasts. There are tours that go through the area as well as aerial tours. There have been several archaeological digs happening in the area, and it would appear that the area is less mysterious and less dangerous than it was at the turn of the century. The 20th century, that is. With that said, I do not want to be the one to investigate that area, but I would say that somebody needs to go in there and do some investigating. So let's take a gander at the mysteriousness of each of these cases, shall we? Let's go down memory lane a little bit. So we started off with the McLeod brothers, who appeared to have been shot while they slept, but their belongings were left minus the gold. Someone had also destroyed any mention of the mine's location, and there is a little nugget that their heads were missing, you know. And then the Scotsman, Weir, while some claim his skeletal remains were found several years later by a group of native indigenous people in the area just downriver, others have stated that those remains were not Weir's and he has never been found. Next, we had the case of Jorgensen, who, according to Poole Field, had also been shot, his cabin burned down, his rifle and his belongings stolen, and oh yeah, his head. It was removed and has never been found. Then we have Mr. O'Brien's death in 1922. While this is not very mysterious, the details are scant, and he could be our outlier because he's the one that was, I think, was the one that froze to death. Then we have the death of Phil Powers in 1932, and he basically died lying in his bed as his cabin burned down around him and the rubble fell on him. Odd thing is, he had rigged his rifle with a tripwire inside the cabin in case someone tried to rob him. You're not going to do that if you're going to commit suicide, boys and girls. There's also the little fact that investigators seem to believe that the fire occurred in 1931, but there was the Phil Powers 1932 quote that was found on a piece of paper. Sure, it could have been an accident, but how do you accidentally lay in bed as your cabin burns down and the rubble falls upon you? Some people do believe that he took his own life, but why do that by setting your cabin on fire and lying in the bed instead of just doing it quick and easy with the gun? Next, we have the Epler and Mulholland, who both vanished in 1936. Their cabin also mysteriously burned down. Then we have Henderson and his partner Patterson, and Patterson's never been found. Henderson's crew of natives said that that's when they saw mysterious white figures roaming around the valley, and they were like, deuces, we're out of here. Last but not least, we have Fred Hardesty and David Horsey. Both men were experienced outdoor enthusiasts or outdoorsmen who just left their cabin one night for no reason, taking no supplies, and somehow David Horsey is said to have frozen to death in 45-degree weather while fully clothed and dry. Nothing suspicious. Nothing suspicious at all. So the big question is, what the fuck is going on in this valley? One possibility is that these people were murdered by their partners or other prospectors in the area. Now, this would be possible and makes the most rational sense for the McLeod, Jorgensen, Powers, Epler, and Mulholland disappearances, but the others would have to be some random accidents, or at the very least, they'd have to be unrelated. So O'Brien's our outlier. He froze to death.
Well, I mean, the fact that they were headless, do you think that it's just coincidence that they were headless? Or do you think, I mean, honestly to God, I think there's some tribe out there that's trying to send a warning.
That's what I thought when I first started.
It's a very strong warning.
And it's a very good one, because this white boy ain't going up there.
Oh, hell no. I mean, if you're going to you're cutting people's heads off and letting them know, hey, this ain't where you need to be.
That's a good deterrent.
Absolutely. I ain't going.
No.
I'm not going.
No, I'm not either. Ain't happening, Captain. Now, Hardesty and Horsey were alone and not prospecting, and Henderson allegedly never saw Patterson after they split up. You could make the assumption that Henderson made up the whole story to cover up him murdering Patterson, but you got to throw that out the window, because the native crew that he had and Henderson didn't come out of the valley with any massive amounts of gold. He also turns around and goes back into the valley to try to find Patterson. In fact, immediately upon getting out of the valley is when he organizes a search party. Yes, that could have been him going overboard to cover his track, but there's not enough evidence to suggest that's what it was. Occam's razor, however, would state that most of these would be tragic accidents. I go back to O'Brien being the outlier. That one probably was a tragic accident. He was checking his traps, freak winter storm comes, he freezes to death. Patterson's could have been an accident if it were not for the fact that he and his crew were never found again. There's that little problem. And then you could explain away Epler and Mulholland by stating that the cabin fire was an accident and they wandered off in search of help and ultimately got lost. Well, Phil Powers could have been an accident in that he could have been unconscious and the cabin burned down around him. And one of the McLeods and Jorgensen were shot to death, so they could not have been accidents. Fred and David could not have been an accident because they appeared to have left the cabin on purpose. And just like Coach said, the spookier reason that I tend to slide towards is the Nakani are real. And there's a remnant tribe of them in the valley who were not part of the Decho community or the Métis community or the white community. And they could have been killing these people to keep them out of their land. Most everyone was found with their belongings. Again, O'Brien would kind of throw it to the side because he was found frozen to death. So it's hard to brush off the palpable fear that the Decho have of the Nakani. While, yes, it could have been stories of the Naha tribe ridding the valley of trespassers, we have actual dead bodies who do not have heads. And that's a hell of a deterrent. If you want to keep people from coming in, kill them and take their heads so that their heads are never found. Now, if you look at May Lafferty's story, it doesn't make any sense that she's able to run away on her own, evade Native American trackers in an area that she's never visited. Could she have been kidnapped? Possibility. That would make sense on how she was able to elude everybody. You cannot dispel actual wild men or a wild tribe who make people disappear. Now, there were a lot of other people in the region due to the gold rush going on. Greed is a hell of a motivator, and people have killed for a lot less. But I truly do not believe we can chalk all of this up to everyone's partners turning on them and having gold fever and killing them in the process. I think you have some sort of lost tribe out there. Again, I really do. Some sort of primitive community, kind of like The Village, that movie, that wants to keep the area to themselves and keep outsiders away. The heads could have been taken as a means to hide the identities of the bodies, but I think they were taken as a trophy. Kind of like some other tribes south of the equator do. But again, I'm just a lovely school teacher with a podcast in a basement. What yunsies think? So I think we're both in agreement that it is some rogue tribe out there. Ain't that right there, Coach?
I mean, definitely there's a tribe out there trying to keep people away. Get the fuck away from us. We will defend ourselves 100%. I definitely agree with that.
I think the other thing that I saw, and there was a couple of different videos I watched trying to research this along with the articles, but one of the videos I saw was the main culprit is that second valley in the river. If you find yourself in that valley with the steep cliffs, you're fucked. Let's just go ahead and say it. Like Chuck with no legs, he's fucked. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is the story, the best we could tell it, of the Nahanni River Valley, or the Valley of the Headless Men. Recommendations?
I have a good one. We watched this weekend. It was on Amazon Prime. It's called Spy High. It's a documentary. Don't be fooled by the Spy High, whatever TV show there is, but Spy High, the documentary, it's about a school in Pennsylvania that took 56,000 pictures of students because they when they gave out the computers for their they gave out computers for their academics.
Oh yeah. I got you.
Yeah, when they took them home, they left them open, and they ended up taking 56,000 pictures of kids doing whatever they do when they're at home alone. And one student ended up suing, a couple other students sued, blah, 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 blah. It's very good. It's very crazy to think about. So, Amazon Prime, Spy High.
I don't think I've recommended this one. I've recommended part of it in the past, but if you are a Lee Child Reacher book fan, the third season of Reacher on Amazon Prime is available for your viewing pleasure. You can binge the whole thing.
I've watched season 1 and season 2, and they are amazing.
Season 3 is even better. I won't say season 3 is even better, but it is very good. There's not a letdown in the storytelling. There is a ginormous man in this season. And when I say ginormous man, I think my wife looked it up. He's 7'2". He is a big motherfucker.
Yeah, I've seen the preview. He's so much bigger than Reacher.
Yeah, and Reacher's 6'3".
Huge man.
Yeah, he makes Reacher look like an average human.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you're right. That's pretty crazy.
They looked at my wife looked it up, and she said that he had to eat, the big guy had to eat something crazy like 5,000 calories a day to keep in shape. My guts would explode. It's in my guts. Anyway, don't forget the self-control that I had over Dee's River and Dee's Lake.
What were you going to say, though?
You know.
Didn't have any self-control. What were you going to say? Dee's River what? Dee's what?
You know
They're D's pecans.
No, I don't.
D's pecans or D's peanuts.
What?
Got him. All right, boys and girls. Coach, do you got anything else? Something has just happened. Let's try that again. I may have to cut that out because my mic went all wonky jaw there. All right, let's try that again. Coach, you got anything else?
Oh, you know I don't.
Deuces.